I still remember the exact moment my life could have ended. The moment a complete stranger saved me from the woman I was supposed to call family. But before I continue, can I ask a favor? Hit that subscribe button, it means a lot, and it helps me tell more stories like this one. The flight attendant leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered words that felt like ice water down my spine. Pretend you're sick and run away. Get off this plane. Now. Her hand squeezed my shoulder with an urgency that made my heart stop. I looked into her eyes and saw something that terrified me more than any turbulence ever could. Genuine fear. Fear for me, a passenger she'd never met before. And in that split second, I had to make a choice that would determine whether I'd live to see tomorrow. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how I ended up in that seat, on that plane, next to a woman who smiled at me in the terminal, like she actually cared. You need to know why I was stupid enough, desperate enough, broken enough, to believe that maybe, just maybe, this trip would fix everything that was shattered between us. God, I was such a fool, such a pathetic, hopeful fool. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that for 6 years, I've been living with a woman who married my father, and decided that loving him meant destroying me. My stepmother, that's what I'm supposed to call her, right? Though the word mother should never be attached to someone who looks at you like you're an inconvenience, a burden, a mistake that she has to tolerate because you came with the package. My real mother died when I was 12. Cancer took her in 8 months, and it took my father's soul with her. He became a ghost in our house, walking through rooms but never really being present, eating dinner but never tasting it, looking at me but never really seeing me. And then he met her. She swept into our lives like she was doing us a favor. Like we should be grateful that someone so put together, so sophisticated, so perfectly polished would waste her time on a broken man and his damaged daughter. At first, I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to believe that the casserole she made, and the way she laughed at my father's terrible jokes, and the way she asked about my day at school, meant that she cared. That maybe, just maybe, I could have a mother figure again. Someone to fill the screaming void that my real mother left behind. But it didn't take long for the mask to slip. It never does it? Evil can only pretend to be good for so long before its true nature bleeds through. The first time she showed me who she really was, I was 13. My father had gone on a business trip, and it was just the two of us in the house. I came home from school with a B- on a math test, not failing, just not perfect, and I found her waiting in the kitchen with that smile. That thin, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. She asked to see the test. I showed her, and she ripped it up in front of my face and told me that mediocrity was a choice, and if I chose to be mediocre, I would be treated accordingly. No dinner that night, or the next. She said I could eat when I learned to respect her standards. I was 13 years old, and I learned what hunger felt like, not because we didn't have food, but because she decided I didn't deserve it. And my father? My father saw nothing. Or maybe he chose to see nothing. Because when he came home, and I tried to tell him, she cried. She actually cried, and said I was being dramatic, that she'd simply encouraged me to do better, and I was twisting her words, because I resented her for not being my real mother. And he believed her. He looked at me with these tired, disappointed eyes, and told me to stop making things difficult, to give her a chance, to be grateful that someone was willing to love us after everything we'd been through. That was the day I learned that the truth doesn't matter if the person hearing it doesn't want to believe you. That was the day I learned I was alone. The years that followed were a masterclass in psychological torture. She was careful, you understand, so careful, never left marks that couldn't be explained away. Never did anything that couldn't be spun as tough love, or high standards, or wanting the best for me. The constant criticism, wrapped in concern, the control disguised as guidance, the isolation presented as protection. She convinced my father that my friends were bad influences, so I lost them one by one. She monitored my phone, my computer, my every move, saying it was because she cared about my safety. She controlled what I ate, what I wore, where I went, who I talked to, and the entire time, she smiled that smile, and told my father how worried she was about me, how difficult I was being, how she was doing her best, but I just wouldn't let her in. By the time I turned 17, I was a shell. I'd learned to be quiet, to be small, to take up as little space as possible in my own home. I'd learned that disagreeing meant punishment, that showing emotion meant weakness, that asking for help meant betrayal. I'd learned to survive by becoming invisible, and I thought that was how it would be until I turned 18 and could escape. Just one more year, just survive one more year, and then I could leave and never look back. But then she suggested the trip. It was March when she brought it up at dinner. Spring break was coming, and she said with that perfect, practiced enthusiasm that we should all go on a family vacation together, to Hawaii. She said it would be good for us, that we needed quality time as a family, that she wanted to bond with me before I went off to college. And the way she looked at my father when she said it, with those big, hopeful eyes, like she was this saint trying so hard to reach her difficult stepdaughter. He ate it up. Of course he did. He said it was a wonderful idea. He said I should be grateful. He said this was exactly what we needed. I didn't want to go. Every instinct in my body screamed not to go. But what choice did I have? If I refused, I'd be the ungrateful daughter again, the difficult one, the problem, and my father would look at me with that disappointment, and she would play the victim, and my last year at home would become even more unbearable. So I said yes. I forced a smile and said yes, thank you, that sounds nice. And she smiled back, but there was something in her eyes, something cold and calculating that made my stomach turn. But I told myself I was being paranoid. That maybe this really was an olive branch. That maybe she really did want to make things better before I left for college. The weeks leading up to the trip were strange. Little things that didn't quite add up but seemed too small to worry about. She insisted on booking everything herself, the flights, the hotel, the activities. She said she wanted it to be a surprise, that she was planning something special. She kept asking about my schedule, about who knew we were going, about whether I'd told my friends. When I mentioned I'd posted about it on social media, she got this tight look on her face and suggested I delete it. She said it wasn't safe to advertise when your home would be empty. That made sense, so I did it. She asked for my passport, said she needed to keep all our documents together. I gave it to her. She suggested we get matching luggage for the trip, something about family unity, and bought me a new suitcase. Said my old one was falling apart anyway. I let her pack most of my things. She said she knew what the weather would be like, what I'd need. It was easier to let her take control. It always was. 3 days before the trip, she took me shopping for a new swimsuit. Just the two of us, without my father. She was almost nice, chatty. Asked about school, about my plans for college, actually seemed to listen to my answers. Bought me lunch at a nice restaurant. Told me she knew things had been hard between us, but she really did care about me. She really did want what was best for me. And God help me, I wanted to believe her. I wanted so badly to believe that maybe she'd changed, that maybe she'd finally decided to be the person she pretended to be in front of my father, that maybe this trip really would be a fresh start. By the time we got home, I'd let my guard down. Just a little, just enough to be dangerous. The night before the flight, I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't name it. Just this gnawing anxiety in my gut, this sense that I was missing something important. I got up around 2 in the morning to get water and saw the light on in her office. The door was cracked open just slightly, and I could hear her voice. She was on the phone with someone, speaking in this low, urgent tone I'd never heard before. I crept closer, staying in the shadows, and listened. I couldn't make out everything she was saying, but I caught fragments. Something about finally handled, something about worth more to me gone than alive, something about can't trace it back. And then she laughed. This cold, satisfied laugh that made every hair on my body stand up. I ran back to my room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my ribs, but I told myself I'd misheard, that I was being paranoid, that I'd taken things out of context, because the alternative, that my stepmother was planning something sinister, was too terrifying to accept. We left for the airport early the next morning. My father kissed us both goodbye at the curb. He wasn't coming on the trip, said he had too much work, but he was so happy we were doing this together. Just me and her. The look she gave me as we walked into the terminal should have been my final warning. It was too satisfied, too eager, like she'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. We checked our bags, she insisted on checking mine for me, said she wanted to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything, and went through security. She bought me a coffee, chatted pleasantly about what we'd do once we landed, showed me pictures of the resort on her phone, acted like the perfect stepmother taking her daughter on a dream vacation. We boarded the plane. She'd booked us seats in row 17, window and middle seat. She took the middle, put me by the window, said she knew I liked looking out at the clouds. The plane filled up around us. Normal people going on normal trips, laughing and talking and completely unaware that sitting in row 17 was a girl who'd somehow stumbled into a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The flight attendants did their safety demonstration. The captain announced our flight time. Everything was routine. Everything was fine. Except it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. And I didn't realize how not fine it was until she appeared. The flight attendant was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes. She'd smiled at us when we boarded, done the standard greeting, nothing unusual. But now she was making her way down the aisle, checking that everyone was buckled in before takeoff, and when she got to our row, she stopped. She looked at me, and her smile faltered. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to notice. My stepmother was looking at her phone, distracted, and the flight attendant leaned down, pretending to check my seatbelt, and that's when she whispered it. "Pretend you're sick and run away. Get off this plane. Now." My blood turned to ice. I stared at her, unable to process what I'd just heard. She straightened up, her professional smile back in place, but her eyes were desperate, pleading with me to listen, to understand. My stepmother looked up from her phone, and the flight attendant moved on to the next row, like nothing had happened. But her hand had squeezed my shoulder with such urgency, such fear, that I couldn't breathe. What did she know? What had she seen? Why was she warning me? My mind was racing, fragments of the past few weeks clicking together like puzzle pieces I'd been too blind to see. The way my stepmother had controlled every aspect of this trip, the phone call I'd overheard, the strange eagerness in her eyes, the fact that no one except my father even knew we were on this plane, and he thought everything was fine. The fact that she'd insisted on packing my things, on handling my luggage, on keeping my passport. The fact that we were about to fly over the ocean for 6 hours, with no way for me to escape or call for help, and that flight attendant had seen something. Something that made her risk her job to warn a complete stranger. I looked at my stepmother. She was scrolling through her phone, calm as could be, completely unbothered. And I realized with a clarity that felt like being plunged into ice water, that this woman who'd tormented me for 6 years, who'd isolated me, and controlled me, and made my life a living hell, had planned something for this trip, something that required me to be on this plane, something that a flight attendant had somehow discovered and was trying to stop. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that if I stayed in this seat, I would never see my 18th birthday. I didn't think. I couldn't think. I just acted. I unbuckled my seatbelt and bent forward, clutching my stomach, and let out a moan. My stepmother looked at me, annoyed. "What's wrong?" she asked, and there was no concern in her voice, just irritation, like I was inconveniencing her by being sick. I moaned louder, making retching sounds, and people around us started to notice. The flight attendant who'd warned me came rushing over, and I could see the relief flash across her face. "I think I'm going to throw up," I gasped. "I feel really sick. Something's wrong." I made myself gag, and that was enough. The flight attendant immediately went into action. "We need to get you off the plane," she said firmly. She looked at my stepmother. "Ma'am, we need to deplane your daughter. She's clearly unwell, and we can't have her getting sick during the flight." My stepmother's face went white, then red, then this twisted mask of barely controlled rage. "She's fine," she snapped. "She's just nervous about flying. She'll be fine once we're in the air." But the flight attendant stood her ground. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but if a passenger is showing signs of illness, we have to remove them from the aircraft. It's policy." She gestured to another attendant, and together they helped me up. My stepmother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin hard enough to bruise. "Sit down," she hissed in my ear. "Stop being dramatic. We're going on this trip." But I pulled away from her, stumbling into the aisle, still clutching my stomach. The flight attendants supported me, guiding me toward the front of the plane. I could hear my stepmother behind us, her voice rising, demanding they let me stay, insisting I was fine, saying she was a nurse and she could tell I was just having anxiety. But they didn't listen. They got me off that plane. And the second my feet hit the jetway, I collapsed. Not from sickness, from sheer terror, and relief crashing over me all at once. The flight attendant, who'd warned me, knelt beside me. "You're safe now," she said quietly. "You're safe." I looked up at her with tears streaming down my face. "How did you know?" I choked out. "What did you see?" She glanced back toward the plane, then at me. "Your stepmother checked a bag in your name," she said carefully. But she checked it at a different counter than her own. Separately. And when she thought no one was watching, I saw her speaking to someone in the terminal, a man who works for a company known for insurance fraud schemes. "I'm trained to spot suspicious behavior, and everything about your situation screamed danger. The way she controlled you, the way you looked trapped, the separate bag. I couldn't be certain, but I couldn't let you get on that plane without warning you. The separate bag, my new suitcase that she'd insisted on buying, that she'd packed for me, that she'd checked separately, and suddenly I understood. She'd put something in my luggage. Something illegal. Something that would either get me arrested in Hawaii far from home, far from anyone who could help me, or worse. Something that could be used to fake my death. Worth more to me gone than alive," she'd said on the phone. Life insurance. My father had life insurance policies on both of us, and if something happened to me on this trip, she'd get the payout, and it would look like an accident, or a tragedy, a sick daughter who'd died far from home. How heartbroken she'd be, how devastated, and my father would never know that she'd murdered me. The rage that hit me then was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It burned through the fear, through the shock, through the years of learned helplessness. This woman had taken 6 years of my life. She'd made me small and scared and silent. She'd isolated me from everyone who cared about me. She'd convinced my father that I was the problem, and now she'd tried to kill me. She'd planned it meticulously, down to every detail, and she'd almost pulled it off. If that flight attendant hadn't been paying attention, if she hadn't trusted her instincts, if she hadn't risked everything to whisper that warning, I would be dead, and my stepmother would have gotten away with it. Airport security was called. The flight was delayed. My stepmother was escorted off the plane, screaming about false accusations and incompetent staff, and how she was going to sue everyone involved. But when they searched my luggage, that new suitcase she'd bought me, that she'd packed for me, they found it. Packages of what looked like drugs hidden in the lining. Later, I learned they weren't actually drugs. They were designed to look like drugs in an X-ray, to get me arrested in Hawaii on smuggling charges. She'd planned for me to be detained, held in a foreign jurisdiction, where she could spin whatever story she wanted to my father. Where I'd be isolated and helpless. Where she could, what, visit me and finish the job? Make sure I never made it home? The investigators never found exactly what her endgame was, but they found enough. They found the insurance policies. They found emails between her and the man the flight attendant had seen her, talking to a con artist with a history of staging accidents. They found searches on her computer about drug smuggling penalties and extradition laws. They found a burner phone with messages discussing getting rid of the problem and making it look natural. They found bank statements showing she was deeply in debt, gambling debts that my father knew nothing about, and that the insurance payout on my death would solve all her financial problems. They found everything. Because she'd been so confident, so sure that her plan would work, that she'd barely tried to hide it. My father was destroyed when he found out. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd defended for 6 years, had tried to murder his daughter for money. He divorced her immediately, pressed charges, testified against her in court, and he apologized to me with tears streaming down his face, begging me to forgive him for being so blind, for not protecting me, for choosing her over me again and again, and I wanted to hate him. Part of me still does, because his willful blindness nearly cost me my life. But he's also a victim of her manipulation. She destroyed our family. She destroyed both of us, and hating him won't undo the damage. She was sentenced to 15 years for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. 15 years. It doesn't feel like enough. It will never feel like enough. Because she didn't just try to kill my body, she spent 6 years killing my spirit, my confidence, my sense of self. She made me believe I was worthless and difficult and wrong. She made me doubt my own perceptions and instincts. She isolated me from everyone who cared about me, and convinced me I deserved it. And even though she's behind bars now, even though I'm safe now, I'm still unpacking the damage she did. I'm still learning how to trust people, how to trust myself, how to believe that I deserve to take up space in the world. But I'm alive. That's what matters. I'm alive because one woman trusted her instincts and had the courage to whisper a warning to a stranger. I'm alive because she saw me, really saw me, and recognized that I was in danger when everyone else just saw a normal family going on a normal trip. She saved my life, and she didn't have to. She could have ignored her suspicions. She could have told herself it wasn't her business. She could have worried about getting in trouble, or being wrong. But she didn't. She chose to act. And that choice is the only reason I'm here telling you this story. I think about that a lot. How many people see danger and do nothing? How many people notice something's wrong, but tell themselves it's not their problem? How many potential victims slip through the cracks, because no one wants to get involved? No one wants to make a scene. No one wants to risk being wrong. That flight attendant risked her job, risked looking foolish, risked my stepmother's wrath, all to save someone she'd never met. And I wish I could tell every person in the world to be like her. To trust their instincts, to speak up, to act. Because you never know when that moment of courage might be the difference between life and death. My stepmother sits in a prison cell now, probably still convinced she's the victim in all this. Probably still thinking that she was justified in what she tried to do. Narcissists never accept responsibility. They never see themselves as the villains. Even now, she sends letters to my father, trying to manipulate him, trying to convince him that she was framed, that I'm lying, that she never would have hurt me. He doesn't respond. He burns the letters without reading them. But the fact that she's still trying, still plotting, still refusing to accept what she did, it chills me. Because if she'd succeeded, if I'd gotten on that plane, she'd be free right now. She'd be collecting insurance money and playing the grieving stepmother, and no one would ever know what she'd done. And the truth is, that wasn't even the end of it. Before I continue, hit that subscribe button because what happened after she went to prison still keeps me up at night. I'm in college now, across the country from where I grew up, in a place where no one knows my story, unless I choose to tell them. I'm studying psychology. I want to understand how people like her think, how they operate, how they manipulate, and I want to help other people who are trapped in situations like I was. People who are being gaslit and controlled and made to feel crazy. People who don't realize they're in danger until it's almost too late. Because I was lucky. I was so lucky. But not everyone gets a warning, whispered in their ear by a stranger who cares. Not everyone has someone watching out for them. My father and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. It's hard. There's a lot of hurt and betrayal to work through. He goes to therapy now, trying to understand how he missed the signs, how he let her abuse me for so long. And I'm in therapy too, unpacking 6 years of trauma, and learning that what happened to me wasn't my fault, that I wasn't difficult or dramatic or wrong, that I was a child being abused by an adult who should have protected me. Some days are better than others. Some days I'm angry at him for not seeing, for not believing me, for choosing her over and over again. Other days, I remember that he's human, that he was grieving and vulnerable, and she took advantage of that. We're both her victims in different ways. The flight attendant's name is Sarah. I found out later, after everything came out. She testified at the trial, explained how she'd been trained to recognize human trafficking and suspicious behavior, how something about the way my stepmother controlled me and the separate luggage check had triggered her concern. She said she'd prayed she was wrong, but she couldn't take the chance. She couldn't let me fly if there was even a possibility I was in danger. After the trial, I met her for coffee. I thanked her for saving my life. She cried and said she was just doing what anyone would do. But that's not true. Most people wouldn't. Most people would look the other way. But she didn't. She saw me. And she acted. And I'm alive. Because of her. We stay in touch now. She's become something of a mentor to me, a friend. She tells me stories about other passengers she's helped, other dangers she's spotted and prevented. She says it's part of the job. But I know it's more than that. She genuinely cares about people. She pays attention. She trusts her instincts, and the world needs more people like her. People who are willing to speak up, who are willing to get involved, who are willing to risk being wrong if it means potentially saving someone. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd ignored her warning. If I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I'd misunderstood, that everything was fine. Would I have made it to Hawaii? Would my stepmother have found another opportunity to complete her plan? Or would the authorities have caught on when they x-rayed my bag at the other end? I'll never know. And I'm grateful I don't have to know. Because I listened. In that moment of confusion and terror, I chose to trust the stranger, who'd whispered a warning instead of the stepmother, who'd smiled and lied, and that choice saved my life. I'm not going to tell you that everything's perfect now. It's not. I still have nightmares about that day. I still panic sometimes in airports or on planes. I still struggle with trusting people, with believing that they mean what they say, with accepting kindness without waiting for the other shoe to drop. The damage my stepmother did runs deep, and healing takes time. Maybe it'll take the rest of my life. But I'm alive to heal. I'm alive to grow. I'm alive to become the person I was meant to be before she tried to destroy me, and that's everything. There's a lesson in this, beyond just trust your instincts or pay attention to warning signs. The lesson is that evil doesn't always look like evil. It looks like my stepmother, polished and put together and charming. It smiles at you and makes you dinner and convinces everyone around you that it cares. It manipulates and controls so gradually that you don't realize you're being abused until you're so deep in it that escape seems impossible. And the people who should protect you might not see it. They might be fooled by the mask. They might choose to believe the lies because the truth is too painful to accept. But there are also people like Sarah. People who see past the masks. People who trust their instincts even when they can't prove anything. People who are willing to risk looking foolish or getting in trouble if it means keeping someone safe. And if you're lucky enough to encounter one of those people in your darkest moment, you hold on to them. You listen to them. Because they might be the only thing standing between you and disaster. If you're reading this and you're in a situation like I was, if someone is controlling you, isolating you, making you feel small and wrong and crazy, please listen to me. You're not overreacting. You're not being dramatic. Your instincts are telling you something's wrong, because something is wrong, and you deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve people who love you without hurting you. You deserve to trust yourself. And there are people out there who will help you if you reach out. Teachers, counselors, hotlines, friends' parents, flight attendants who notice something's off. Don't ignore the warnings, whether they come from inside you or from strangers who care. Don't stay silent. Don't make yourself small. Don't convince yourself it'll get better if you just try harder to be good enough, because you're already good enough. The problem isn't you. It never was you. And if you're reading this and you see something that doesn't seem right, someone being controlled or isolated or afraid, please don't look away. Please trust your instincts. Please speak up. You might be wrong. The situation might be fine. But what if it's not? What if your moment of courage is the difference between that person living or dying? What if that whispered warning, that offered help, that call to authorities is what saves them? Don't let the fear of being wrong stop you from potentially being the hero in someone's story. The world needs more people like Sarah. More people who pay attention and act. More people who choose compassion over convenience. I'm alive today because a stranger cared more about my safety than about being polite or avoiding conflict. I'm alive because she saw danger and didn't ignore it. I'm alive because, when she whispered that warning, I listened. And every day that I wake up and breathe and exist in this world is a gift that I almost didn't get. Every moment of joy, every accomplishment, every relationship, every experience I have for the rest of my life exists because of that single act of courage from someone who owed me nothing. So this is me telling you, pay attention to the people around you. Pay attention to your own instincts. If something feels wrong, don't dismiss it. If someone needs help, don't assume someone else will step in. If you see danger, don't look away, because sometimes the quietest warnings save the loudest lives. Sometimes, a whispered sentence in an airplane aisle is all that stands between someone and their doom. Sometimes, caring about a stranger makes you the reason they survive. My stepmother wanted me dead. She planned it meticulously. She smiled while she did it. and she almost succeeded. But she didn't. Because one person paid attention, one person cared, one person acted. And now I'm here, telling you this story, hoping that maybe you'll be that person for someone else. Hoping that maybe someone reading this, who's trapped like I was, will realize they deserve better, and reach out for help. Hoping that maybe someone reading this will remember that moment when something seemed off, and instead of ignoring it, they'll trust their instincts and speak up. 10 minutes after that flight attendant whispered her warning, I should have been 30,000 feet in the air, trapped next to a woman who wanted me dead, with no escape and no help. Instead, I was safe on the ground, watching that plane take off without me, knowing that I'd just barely escaped my own murder. 10 minutes. That's how close I came. 10 minutes between life and death. 10 minutes between becoming a tragedy and becoming a survivor. And every 10 minutes that passes now is a gift. Every moment is borrowed time that I almost ran out of. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure that time wasn't wasted. Making sure that my survival means something. Making sure that other people get their warnings too, whispered or shouted, before it's too late. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked past me. Thank you for trusting your instincts. Thank you for risking everything to save someone you didn't know. Thank you for being the reason I'm still here. And thank you to everyone else who's ever spoken up, who's ever helped a stranger, who's ever trusted that small voice that says something's wrong and acted on it. You're the reasons people like me survive. You're the reasons evil doesn't always win. You're the reasons hope still exists in this world. And to my stepmother, sitting in your cell, probably still convinced you're the victim, I survived you. I'm healing from you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life the life you tried to steal, helping other people escape people like you. You wanted me dead and silent. Instead, I'm alive and speaking. You wanted me erased. Instead, I'm becoming more visible every day. You wanted me small. Instead, I'm growing into someone strong and fierce and unafraid. You didn't break me. You tried, but you failed. And that failure is going to haunt you for every single day of those 15 years you're locked away. Because you'll know that I'm out here, free and alive, while you rot behind bars for what you tried to do. That's justice. That's karma. That's you, finally getting exactly what you deserve. Sometimes the quietest warnings save the loudest lives. Sometimes a stranger's courage changes everything. Sometimes survival is the best revenge. And sometimes, the girl you tried to destroy becomes the woman who ensures your story serves as a warning to others. I was that girl. Now I'm that woman. And I'm not done yet. Not by a long shot. This is just the beginning. If this story hit close to home, or made you think about the people you trust, leave a comment, and tell me what part resonated with you. And don't forget to subscribe. I have more stories that remind us just how strong we can be when everything falls apart.